How do you manage 4, maybe 6 or 10 kids, all with musical instruments, in a group music class? That's what we're talking about today on Rock School Proprietor Podcast. Mandy and I talk about the different tips and tricks that have worked for us in group classes. We talk about how different age groups require different strategies and how we get results, all while creating an environment that the kids enjoy. Stay tuned. Welcome to Rock School Proprietor Podcast. I'm John Kozicki.
And I'm Mandy York.
Mandy, today we're going to talk about behavior management in group classes, right? And this was something that you kind of brought up to me, not because of your music together classes, right?
Not because of my young mixed age classes.
Okay, because with those classes, they can pretty much...
Caregivers are in
whatever.
the space. Yeah. It's different.
Yeah. What inspired you to want to talk about behavior management in groups then? Because I want to know, like, what kind of issues are you dealing with?
Well, the majority of what I teach, and for 10 years, I've been teaching mixed age, babies through age 5, music together classes. Caregivers are in the space. I mean, you have to manage the classroom, right?
Sure.
But you're mostly managing grown-ups, really. And it is easier most of the time to get grown-ups on board with what you're doing. But, 5 or 6 years ago, I started teaching rhythm kids classes. And I don't teach very many of those.
What's the age range for your rhythm kids classes?
That is kindergarten to 2nd grade.
Okay, so now you're getting into like that sweet spot where kids are impulsive and like they can kind of be destructive.
Yeah, and unlike my, 2 and 3 year olds, they are talking a lot.
Right.
They have a lot more to say.
Yeah.
And there are no caregivers in the class when I'm working with just the kindergarten through 2nd grade.
Yeah.
So that's the big difference too.
Okay. And how many kids do you have in your rhythm kids classes?
I teach those anywhere between 5 to 10 kids in a class.
All right. That's a decent amount of kids to manage with drums in their hands.
Yeah.
And then you had mentioned to me recently that you've been teaching a kids choir?
Yeah.
And have you had issues there too?
That's been a new experience too. I started working with a community choir.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's kindergarten through 5th grade.
Okay. And how many kids?
I've had, 13 to 18 in that group. Mm-hmm.
Of those different types of classes, which has been the most challenging for you to manage with the behavior stuff that we're talking about?
The rhythm kids group, kindergarten through 2nd grade.
Okay. Why do you think that is?
I think that I have a very good mix in the choir of kindergarten, 1st grade, as well as 4th and 5th grade. And I think that the older kids anchor the group a little bit. Mm-hmm. They have a better...
set the example.
Exactly.
Right.
They have a better understanding of what the expectations are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So for me, in the Rock School, we have groups categorized in, pretty much all age groups, but we tend to try and keep 4 to 7-year-olds together in our kids rock groups. We do 8 to 11-year-olds in our beginner rock band. We've got rock band programs that are kind of more around 12 to 14-year-olds, and then older kids that are about 14 to 18-year-olds. So very much like with the kids rock being the exception, everything else is a lot like elementary school age kids, middle school age kids, high school age kids. I mean, we also have the adults, but generally don't have behavior issues with the adults. So I've definitely seen, and having had hands-on experience teaching, coaching, instructing all of these different age groups at one point or another, you got to handle each age group differently, I think.
Yes.
So I thought, well, mean, my initial thought when you mentioned the behavior stuff, I thought like, well, the behaviors demonstrate in different ways. The behaviors need resolution in different ways. The behaviors need management in different ways. It's so with all these categories and age groups that I have, maybe like let's talk a little bit about your rhythm kids first.
Okay.
I guess.
Yeah.
So what's the biggest issue when you're dealing with what you would consider behavior issues, or how does it present itself?
Interruptions.
Okay.
So when I'm a pro at this mixed age, early age thing.
Mm-hmm.
I've got it. When I started teaching rhythm kids, I was like, well, this is going to be a blast. They're just bigger kids. You expect more from them in this class, a little bit more. There's no grown-ups here. It's going to be our big kid music club. Same thing, just different kids. And I mean, I've immediately realized it is not the same. It's not the same at all.
I would say in terms of age group and what you're doing in those classes, that's most similar to what we do with our 4 to 7 year olds with our Kids Rock.
Yes. Yep. I would say so.
Okay.
Yeah. So I got in the space, and I'm sitting in front of these kids, and I was constantly interrupted. You start to explain something and then it's immediately like, what are we going to do next? Do you have a husband?
Right.
I have a wiggly tooth.
It's
just so overwhelming, and it's so fun. It's easy for you as a teacher to get kind of caught up in it and spend so much time learning about the wiggly teeth and what your favorite color is.
Yes.
I remember my feelings early on where I was getting stressed after my first, several classes. Like, I'm not covering the material that I need to cover. This is bad. How do I gain control? This is not going well.
Mm-hmm.
The kids were having a blast. Everyone was smiling. You know what I mean? But my stress level was up because I was feeling like I'm not cut out for this. I'm not giving the kids all the information and material that is in my plan, right? You go in there with this plan and quickly realize I didn't get through half of it.
Yeah, that age group is challenging.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that of all the age groups that we serve at the Rock School, that's the most challenging. And when I go to either hire instructors or I have instructors teach that age group, 4 to 7 year olds, I can't just ask one of my, I've got almost a dozen instructors. I can't just grab one of them and say like, hey, I need you to teach this class today. There is a specific skill set and a specific mindset, I think, and not everyone can teach that age group. So there's tricks to it, there's nuance, and most of it, all of it is because of like how you have to manage those behaviors, because it has nothing to do with the musical content. Like, yeah, anyone can grasp the musical content, but it's how you keep those kids engaged enough so that, like you're saying, so that you are getting through the material and they're not bouncing off the walls and asking you, are you married? What's your favorite color? What did you have for dinner today?
Yes.
All that other stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what strategies have you employed now that you've done it for a while and you realized in the early days you're not getting through the content and it's not the way you want it to be?
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that was important for me personally, I had to lighten up on myself a little bit. That's why I mentioned that I was really hard on myself in the beginning and worried that like I'm not doing a good job.
Mm-hmm.
I had to let go a little bit and know that like I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to get through X amount.
Okay.
Right?
And was your thought process about getting through a certain amount of material, was that like you wanted to get through that material, or you wanted to make sure the kids learned that much?
Well,
or both.
Or both, right? Both. And I feel this, this is all me and inside my head.
Yeah.
Not everybody's the same. But I was like, the parents are expecting this. I need to do a good job for the kids and the parents.
Yeah.
I learned to lighten up.
Which we've talked about, right? That's self-imposed.
Totally.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So take it easy on yourself. You know, these classes were not by any means total disasters. Zoom out, take a look at what's really going on. The kids were having fun. We were getting through material. But I had to learn to adjust how I presented things, kind of knowing what comes next, in giving instructions, being very specific. Not saying like, okay, we're going to get our djembes. Because once you say that, they jump up,
right?
Yep. To go get their djembe. You have to say, okay, I'm going to tell you the 3 things we're going to do.
3 things. Key.
Yes.
That's key. Yes. The 3 things. That's on my list too.
Yes. Right. So to be very specific with them, and know that, because if you just say, this is what they're doing, they're going to jump up and do it. Say something like, these are the 3 things. I want you to get your djembe. I want you to slowly walk to this side of the room and then get in playing position.
Yeah.
Okay, now go. That's something that I've learned. My trial and error, just seeing that happen over and over. And then I realized like my energy level is higher with those kids than it is with the tinier ones.
Yeah.
I think I get a lot of energy from the grown-ups in my classes, from the mixed age group, which is how it should be. Those caregivers are modeling for their young children. Mm-hmm. In a K through 2nd group, I'm the only adult, right? So my energy level is higher.
I've found when I've had to jump in and teach the 4 to 7 year olds, I am exhausted after even just doing like 1 or 2 classes, right? Yeah. So even because what I've found is my strategy to keep them engaged is to try and be more interesting than everyone else, to keep them occupied, right? So then I'm kind of performing, I'm putting on a show, but also to reduce or eliminate any breaks, any silence in that class. Because if there is a break and if there is a silence, I know that those kids are going to find something to do, and then I'm going to have to redirect them.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, for sure. I feel like when I have to do those classes, or when I have had to do those classes, absolutely exhausting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. You mentioned a couple things that I wanted to highlight because they're all in various ways on my list too. Number 1 is establishing a routine. You have to establish the routine, number 1, so you're able to effectively teach the class, so you know how to lead them through. But also, as the kids get comfortable, as they come to a few classes, they start to expect what that routine is. Mm-hmm. If you're like winging it every class, the kids don't know what's going on. They don't know how they're supposed to behave, right? Mm-hmm. So establishing that routine is so important. And they will keep
you honest too, right?
Yeah,
if you would do a good job of establishing the routine, they'll call you out. They're like, "Oh, we were supposed to do this next,
right?
Or shouldn't we put these over here when we're finished?"
Yeah. It's you mentioned the 3 things. I do this, and I suggest this with my band coaches, with all of my instructors. If you're teaching a group class, write down what you're going to do in that class on the whiteboard, right? These are the 3 things we're doing in rehearsal today. These are the 3 things we're going to do in class today. Refer back to it. At the beginning of class, show them these are the 3 things. Then refer back to it every time you need to. Like, okay, we did number 1. We're in the middle of number 2. We still haven't finished number 2. Having that visual schedule and that visual understanding of what you're trying to accomplish in each class, again, helps the kids feel like they understand what's what's expected of them, and what is going to happen. And then the third thing I wanted to mention was it's like training puppies. It takes constant repetition and patience. And most of the time, especially with the little kids, if you say it once, you're going to have to say it a few more times. Yeah. Just like you would a puppy. Because their brains are all over the place, like you direct them to one thing and then they're like, okay. And then they're off to something else. You got to bring that attention back to whatever it is you're focusing on.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. I mean, the good news is they do like repetition and routine. They really do. They thrive on that. So, I have to remind myself that from time to time because it may feel, too repetitive to you, right? Like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this again. Don't get caught in that because they're not feeling that same way. They do like the routine and repetition. And
I've found, to piggyback on that, I've found that with a lot of my instructors and band coaches, they will get bored with whatever part they're working on way before the kids in the group will, right? So I, again, I'm always encouraging them, like, get reps in. Just if they're not doing it like 3 times in a row, like to a level that you feel they've got it, then start over and like just keep getting reps in. Yeah.
It is very satisfying to them. It is.
Right.
Yeah. Good to remind yourself. Another thing about the behavior, kind of what you had said, they're all over the place. I suppose this is a why. In most cases, we're getting them at the end of the day. In my case, I'm getting them after school. Sure. These kids have been keeping it together all day long, right? And this isn't like school. This isn't a rigid experience. I mentioned earlier, I call it our Big Kids Music Club. So they're excited to be there. Yeah. Another good thing to remind yourself about, right? That balancing my teacher goals versus the experience of the kids. Yep. Right. I can see my effectiveness in the rhythm patterns that they're learning, in the smiles on their faces and the way they're moving their feet to a beat, right? Remind yourself of all those little things and balance those things, your teacher goals versus the experience of the kids. Yeah, I don't know. As I'm sitting here thinking about this, that's what I keep coming back to because I just think I can get so hard on myself about trying to be too perfect in these situations.
When you think about behavior issues in these classes, everything you've described so far is really just about capturing attention. That's kind of what I've heard. Yeah. And which I think most of the time, even with all the different age groups that we serve at the Rock School, that's really what's going on. Most of the time you just need to redirect or like recapture their attention. But has it escalated at all in your situation?
For sure. I mean, sometimes like you say, you have to redirect or pivot. Like, okay, we're finished with that. Everybody stand up. You know what I mean? Sometimes you just need to change the energy level. Like this small movement activity they're just not in it. And there's too many things happening. So I just switch gears. I get everybody up. I turn on my next, I always have a plan ready to go, but I'll just switch to my next activity, a large movement, turn on the music, and here we go. Changing gears to kind of refocus everybody. And I find like going big helps. You know what I mean? Okay. Not, hey, you guys, hey, we're not focusing. We need to be quiet. Like, hey, we need to be respectful. You need to quiet your voice. That's not working. That's not going to work, right? Sometimes redirecting like to a large movement or Or I'll say like, okay, give me a forte drum roll. Let's go. Forte, forte.
Yeah.
Go, go,
like
go,
loud,
go, go, go,
loud,
go.
quiet, loud. Yeah, we do that.
Yeah, using contrast in class.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That works often.
Okay. I want to get into it a little with like kind of some nuts and bolts stuff
Let's
that
hear
I've
it.
seen at the
I'm
Rock School.
curious. I'm really curious.
Because I'll be honest, I think that everything you've encountered sounds a little benign.
Well, you know
We've
what?
had some serious issues.
And I think about
classes.
like, we're working through a book of rhythm patterns and we're just playing music together. It is very just, playing with music.
Right.
It's quite informal, really. You guys are preparing for a concert.
Yep. Because it's kind of goal based.
Yeah.
Even with the 4 to 7 year olds, it's like we have to. There's a result that we're trying to get, and there's a finish line for this, and it involves a performance. So the stakes are a little higher. Now, I will say with the younger kids in the same age group that you're describing, most of it has been kind of the same issues that you've experienced, right? But with the 4 to 7 year olds, the two big issues are, and this, okay, so this one across the board, the biggest issue is what we call noodling, right? And noodling is playing your instrument when you're not supposed to, when the band coach or instructor is talking, you shouldn't be playing. And so with the 4 to 7 year olds, we've done like sticks up, picks up, right, and get their hands up, so that way they're not making any noise with their instruments, or quiet coyote, right? Quiet coyote.
Nice.
But again, that's like that training a puppy thing.
Yeah.
If you're consistent with that in the classes, when you bust that sticks up, picks up out, then they know what to do, and they'll usually fall into line.
Yeah.
The other one's talking, right? Again, across the board with like all the age groups, it's talking, it's noodling, relatively benign stuff, right? It's all about just, okay, we have to refocus, we have to redirect their attention. Again, it's about training the puppy. That's why I think the visual schedule for each class and what the goals are for each class is really important, because in the moment when you've got an agenda of 3 things that you want to get through and you've only gotten through one of them and you got maybe 10 minutes left, you redirect them to the whiteboard and say like, okay, here's where we are. We've done the first thing. We're still not through the second thing. We got to get through all these things before the end of class. Usually that's enough to kind of refocus them.
Yeah.
You can use that as an incentive. Also, we've done that where like, okay, if we get through these 3 things, then by the end of the class, you guys can talk about what you're doing this weekend or talk about whatever, sort of reward. We've even done like, you get Skittles or something like that.
Yeah.
So
we play a musical game at the end of class. It's always in the last spot. Okay. And same thing. Like, oh, we got to get through this so that we can play the game. Right. Oh my gosh, they go crazy for that, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So what happens when it escalates though? Now, again, rarely have we had that issue with the 4 to 7 year olds. This seems to surface, I would say, more like, 9, 10, 11-year-old age range. What do you do when you continually ask them to stop playing their instrument? When you continually ask them to stop talking when the instructor or the band coach is trying to explain something? Have you had that issue?
I have once not done the game at the end of class. I felt so bad. Okay. One time we did not do the game.
Okay.
And like you said, quiet Quiet Coyote
Yeah.
or Six Up, Picks Up. I do put your drums in sleeping position. We turn them upside down, the djembes. Occasionally, I'll have, one student. You need to put your drum in sleeping position right now.
Yeah.
I'll come back to you. It's tough doing those kind of things.
Okay, so you haven't had level 2.
I have not had level 2
behavior issues.
No.
So yeah, level 2 behavior issues are those things where it's like, okay, you've done all this stuff. You've turned the instruments down. You've like used all these techniques, tried to redirect. They're still persisting on, not doing what they're supposed to do. Generally what we'll do and what I recommend for my band coaches is, if that's the case, then you say, all right, well, why don't you go out of the rehearsal room 5 minutes? Just take 5 minutes. You're welcome to come back in as soon as you feel focused.
Yeah.
When you throw that out there, though, you tell my band coaches, you have to follow through. You can't just say that. Hey, if you do this again, I'm going to put you out for 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if you say that, you have to commit to doing it, or else they know you're not serious.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely.
So we've done that. No, it doesn't happen a lot, but in extreme cases when things are chaotic, because it's usually one kid that's sort of the source of the chaos. And if you can remove that kid, then everything comes back into line. But that chaos makes it a bad situation, just a bad experience for everyone, right? Not just him, not just like the other kids who are getting weird, but also the kids who are really want to focus.
Yeah. So
that's a good technique. At least it's worked for us, where you just say, all right, 5 minutes. Rarely are they out there for 5 minutes, at least in my experience. Usually it's like they're super embarrassed, right, that they actually have to leave the rehearsal room. God forbid their parents are in the waiting area when that happens, right? Because then they'd be mortified. The parents are mortified. So usually they're out for a couple minutes, come back in, back to business. So that would be like level 2 behavior problem. And then you got level 3 behavior issues.
Have you had level 3?
Level 3 behavior issues is when it just gets so chaotic that we're not making progress. We're not on schedule with learning and putting together the songs. Every band rehearsal is just kind of a wreck. So our strategy when that happens, and that's when, even 5 minutes out in the room doesn't get things back together, maybe like 5 minutes out of the rehearsal room and they're back in and doing the same thing again. So, what I've found is the most important thing to do in those situations is to first get everyone on the same page. So the band coach has to be clear on how you're going to proceed. The members of the group or the students have to understand what the expectations are. And then also you let the parents of those kids know, like, this is what's going on. So number 1, we send an email to all the parents in the group. Things have been a little crazy in band rehearsal lately. Here's a reminder of what our expectations are in band rehearsal. If, we can't keep things under control, these are the strategies that we employ. And I, lay out the strategies I just mentioned to you. It would also be really helpful if you talk to your kid and let them know that, we've got to make some progress and we can't keep going this way. So that's kind of like level 3. Yeah. It's happened, and usually, that's always been enough to kind of get things back on track.
Yeah, I'm
I
sure.
can't imagine if it gets worse than that. But
Yeah. Once you get the parents involved,
yes.
I'm sure that takes care of it.
Yeah, and I think what I've seen with my band coaches is much like you internalized it when you said, "Oh, I'm not getting through the content that I want to get through." They do the same thing. They say like, "I'm not good at this. These kids don't listen to me. Like their parents are going to think I'm horrible, right?" And that's not really the case. What it is just kind of like that perfect storm of, like you said, the end of the school day, they're able to cut loose. I also generally think that we're dealing with creative brains that are, they're pretty active.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of energy going on in those brains, and it just sort of flows out. So I don't think it's the band coach and the instructor's, fault, as long as they're following kind of a plan. It just is what it is. And I don't think they're going to be blamed by the parents.
Right. Yeah. I think that was an important mindset change I needed to make, and then implement all of these, like setting expectations and all of the strategies that you said.
So
Yeah.
do you think that, think you got everything under control now?
Well, I mean, I have had a really good year actually with Rhythm Kids. It gets better. But I mean, each group, each semester change, you're starting over, really. You've got some kids that know the expectations, but you've always got newcomers that don't. Consistency is important. Like we said, ritual, repetition, consistency is helpful.
And you never know how those personalities are going to mix.
Yeah, that's so fascinating, right? Like you said, it's kind of one of your examples. One kid can kind of stir the pot a little bit, but you add one or two new kids to the mix. It's really interesting how it changes the dynamic.
We had one group. This was years ago. This was it was a group of all middle school boys and one girl, and they were like off the walls, right? So hard to manage that group. Got through the session, made it through the performance. The girl wasn't going to do the next session, right? She was going off to do volleyball or something, right? So, first rehearsal of the new session, all the same boys, fine.
Yeah.
Absolutely fine.
So funny. Oh my gosh.
They were all like, and I didn't, like, we were banging our heads against the wall trying to figure out, like, how do we get these kids to focus? We've tried all of our techniques, right? And we realized after the fact, it's like, oh, they were all just kind of posturing for a 13-year-old girl in the room.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So in that situation, that's biological. You
Right.
can't control that.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
I like your idea of writing your goals on the whiteboard. I think that's something I'm going to try these next couple weeks.
Yeah.
I really
and you
like
can
that,
even
having
check it
that
off,
board
right?
there.
Done.
Yeah.
We did it. Yay. Have a
Yeah.
little celebration.
I like that. And for listeners, I've spent time in other classrooms too. That's always something you can do. I've been to the elementary school to watch kindergarten classes. Go watch another teacher's class. Go get ideas from people.
Yes.
I'm always welcoming when people want to check out my space. Like, it's a great way to learn.
I agree. I think it's not as easy as just teaching private lessons, right? Where you are the focal point.
Yeah.
Always, so that's super easy to manage. Totally a learnable skill too. I've done it. I've taught my instructors to manage these groups like this, and they've come in with like zero prior experience with groups. Totally doable. It just takes practice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll wrap this one up. This was a good one. Thanks, Mandy.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
We'll see you next time.
See ya.
Some of these group classes can be challenging, and a few times in this episode, Mandy and I mentioned the self-imposed pressure that we put on ourselves as instructors. If you want more on that topic, we go pretty deep into that on episode 10, Prioritize Playing Over Teaching in Private Lessons. I encourage you to go back and listen to that one. If you've got any questions about groups, be happy to help if we can. You can reach out to us at info@rockschoolproprietor.com. Show notes and transcripts for this and all episodes can be found at rockschoolproprietor.com. I'm at rock.school.proprietor on Instagram. If you'd like to connect with me there, you can also find me on LinkedIn as John Kozicki. As always, if you enjoyed this show and gained insight from our conversation, then we count that as a win. All we ask in return is that you pay it forward. Please share the show with someone you think needs to hear it.